Well, that week certainly went quick because it only feels like an hour or two that I was doing the last one, strangely. So you will know from if you watch my last week's interview that this is actually pre-recorded, and we are doing it about an hour after the last one finished. But this is because I can't make next week, and I didn't want to stop these going out. And I've got an absolutely superb artist for you in this particular show. Going to be really interesting. Something we've not had before, which is a doctor who's an artist. It's absolutely fascinating work, and we will get to that. But of course, what you also need to know: only 2 weeks to the private view at Flux. Little bit of a taster. This was last year's event at the private view. I'm just going to give you a taster now, little video to show you what that was like. So yeah, there you go. And what's really good about it this time is we've got quite a few new artists come along, and tonight's guest is exactly that, a new artist to Flux, and we're really, really looking forward to seeing what she does. And as usual, of course, I've put together a video of her work, and we'll be showing another one a little bit later on of how she does what she does. But this is Kate Grant. So it's going to be very interesting, as you can see. So let's bring Kate in and say hello.
Hi, Gary. Hi. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolute pleasure. And I was talking to you just before we started to go live that there's quite a few interesting bits in your sort of biography and also how you work. But let's start right at the beginning. So, um, why art? What was it? What drew you to art, and how long ago was that?
So yeah, we're having a laugh. So I'm 21, of course. I think I didn't think I was particularly artistic when I was little. I think I grew up in that environment where people say you're either talented or you're not talented. You know, Mozart's a genius, and he couldn't possibly have spent hundreds of thousands of hours practicing. So I literally thought that I didn't have something, that little secret sauce, so I couldn't be an artist. You go through your school classes, and then I got to sort of age 13. I made a brand new teacher at school, and in fact, I'm actually meeting her for the first time in probably 35 years tomorrow,
Wow.
which is mind-blowing to me. It's quite excited, and I think she's going to be really disappointed. But actually, I think so she came along to our school, and she was like she rather than just having projects like the 12 Days of Christmas where everyone picked a number and did their own imaginary painting of swans are swimming, she actually said, right, we're going to do like this art school a year, and I'm going to take you through all these technical things. So she got us all drawing eggs and glasses and transparent things. She had us drawing posters with lettering. She had us out in the field looking at trees, like from a distance, shapes, branches, what the leaves look like. So quite technical stuff. We were drawing. We're doing urban sketching is what we call it now. But she took us right around the town, and we had to draw a building and then do perspective lines. So
Wow.
she kind of put us through a lot of paces, taught us about complementary colours. And I suddenly thought, I've got a whole bunch of new skills. And on the back of that, some of them popped up to the surface, which I carried on using. About a year later, I won a local art competition, carried on with, studying art. And I wanted to go to art college, and my dad said no. You know,
Very interesting. That I'm going to swap you over. Yeah.
parents, I think they think you have to have a profession sometimes, and it's
Mm.
straight out to the 70s and 80s. It's not necessarily, people don't imagine you could make a living from it. That's something that I think people say over you, and they can't ever imagine. And I've had even my accountant say to me, "You'll never do it." It you know
And it is true because there is that struggling artist thing,
yeah,
but also there's, and I talk about this quite a lot, but I think there's an element of if you believe that, that's what you end up. If
yeah,
you believe, it depends if you think positively. If you're
yeah,
a positive thinker and you think everything's going to go swimmingly,
yeah,
I'm very fortunate, as are you, because you are a doctor,
yeah,
and so you do have that. So,
yeah. I
were your parents right? Were they wrong? You've got that background that allows you to
yeah,
do what you do.
yeah,
Um, and maybe you would think same as I would. I would think perhaps differently if I wasn't. But I'm in a fortunate position where I can say, "Well, no, I'm sorry. That picture is that much money, and
yeah,
if you don't want it, don't buy it." But
yeah.
there are a lot of artists who can't do that. So swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, and even one of my brothers, same thing. Um, he's been, and I was like 12 years older than him, so I was sort of always giving him drawing stuff when he was little,
Mm,
encouraging him to draw. He also was, no, you can't go to art school, and now he's raised a family of 4 kids as a computer games animator. you know,
yeah.
having later gone to do a boring degree, then went back to art school, and now so I think actually sometimes if it just comes out of you somewhere, if you really want to keep doing it, it will seep out of all of your pores, and you can't stop it. And I have to paint. I have to be creative. I don't think I can do my day job unless I'm also got some creative outlet somewhere. So I do that. But going back to taking opportunities. We were living in America for a time, and I think I'd got 2 children under the age of 2, you know, spending a lot of time by myself at home with 2 little babies, and, you know, got horribly, you know, depressed, like postnatal. And I had a friend come over and say, "Oh, I'm going to an art show." And I said, "Oh, I used to paint." And she said, "What do you mean you used to paint?" And the next time she came over, she just dumped a whole bunch of watercolors and paper and kit on the table and said, "Stop moaning, get on with it."
But yeah, but that's sometimes you
Yeah.
need that. I have a real thing about people.
People say they drop something into your life at the right moment, and then
Yeah,
you fly
it,
with it, you know. Like that teacher, you know, she put something in my head that made me think, well, if you can't draw, I'm going to teach you how to do it. I'm going to teach you so that even if
yeah,
you can't draw this, you'll have skills to
mm,
do that. And if you can't draw a stick man, you can design a poster, and it can be, you know, like uh, what do you call it, like geometrical stuff or linear, you know. It was just interesting because she managed to get everybody doing something successfully, even
mm,
if they weren't all doing stuff from their imagination. You know, it was great for the boys because they didn't really want to do imaginative sort of like narrative stuff. They wanted to draw bikes and chairs and, you know, with their pencil and charcoal and whatnot. And so and then so going back to being in the States, this friend of mine had given me this watercolor. And we were living a mile from the beach in Florida, and I'd drop the kids at nursery, and then I'd go and sit on the beach with my coffee, plastic bag, bit of paper or pad, and just start sketching the waves because I thought, I'm not going to let this beat me. I've got to figure out how to paint the sea.
right. So we can bring one of those up.
Yeah. So I basically, this is Florida. I
Mm,
basically went down there every single morning, and I sat watching the waves come over and over and over until I could see where the curve was, where the foam was, what was doing with the undercurrent, where the water was swept up and round. And I just figured out which bit was transparent, and that was just looking and looking and looking and looking. And so
and
yeah,
so these are
these are
watercolors.
watercolors, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So these are
yeah.
watercolors because I also, you were you know, talking about colors. I really like, and some people think watercolors are all transparent, but they're really not. You know, you can get staining colors, transparent colors. You can get granulating ones, opaque ones, and I've really only like working with transparent staining colors because you can layer them like glass, like
Okay.
glass, so you can always see the white of the paper bouncing up through them because they're transparent. So I will often paint my paintings. I'll do all the yellows first, all the reds next, and all the blues last. So it looks almost like a screen printing process. When, you know, if I ever showed you, I won't get around to it now, but if I ever showed you how I start, the whole paper is yellow, but I've got like a warm yellow at the front of the foreground of the pictures, and I've got a cool yellow at the back, like on the horizon, and then I do
Right.
warm reds and cool reds, warm blues and cool blues. So it gives you dimension as well as color and shadow, you know.
So
So
one of the questions I ask when people say that
yeah.
exactly along the lines that you've just said, but you know, how long did it take you to develop that? Because that's not something you just naturally do. You
So it's
that would have been a few goes.
that so that was driving up and down to the art shop with dollars. And I actually remember this moment where I knew that I'd turned a corner when I came out of the art shop. I had said to myself, because, you know, we're very British, aren't we? We do paint on small bits of paper with tiny little brushes, and we're not very brave. And I bought this massive big board that was, you know, like A1 or something. I bought the biggest brush I could that was still a watercolor brush. Now, it was probably the size of a wooden spoon. It wasn't very big, but for me, it was massive. It was like a pitchfork. And I was so proud of myself And I don't know. And I remember thinking, I actually feel happy. And I can still in my head feel that thing flick into, oh, I've had my first happy thought. And I love my kids, and they're now 20 and 22, and I didn't not love them. It's just more that you can be in a place when you've had a baby, and sometimes it's a place you don't really want to go. But I just realized that actually something had healed in my head, and so I was driving along this main highway parallel to the beach, the sun pouring in the window. I'd bought this enormous paintbrush, and I was going to do something with it. And one of like phthalo blue, which is my go-to color for the sea, Payne's grey. I'd got those two. I'd got these massive big tubes of it, and I thought, oh, I'm going to really do this. So I started painting really big, well, big ones. Not just with my sketch pad, because I just sketch and sketch and sketch, and then I had really big, like I'm trying to think of the sizes, 16 by 20 sort of, which is quite big for a watercolor, because you've got to be, it dries, you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
So I started doing these seascapes, and this friend, you know, came over for coffee one day. She said, well, what have you been working on? I just said, all these, and she just looked at me and she said, these are really good. And I said, oh, yeah, thanks. And she said, no, they're really good. She said, I used to work in a gallery, we used to sell these. And I said, well, don't be stupid. And she said, no, really, I'm serious. And I'm just like, no self-belief at all. But to me, I was really pleased with them. But she was just like, no, these are really good. So I then, the next few days, there was a gallery near where I lived called Stella's Gallery, who later represented me. And I drove past it to take my daughter to nursery. And one day I thought, I've got to go in there. I just had this pressure in my head that I had to go, because to me, America's a meritocracy. You know, it's not about whether you've been to, you know, Royal Academy or you've got some diploma. You know, if people like it, they can buy it. What's wrong with that, you know? And I drove around this sort of one-way system about 8 times, and I went in there sweating, and I just said, hello, I'm an artist. And she just said, I said, I've got some work, would you like to look at it? And she said, sure. And then she just flicked through them all, and she said, have you got any more? She said, I'll take all of these. And I was just like, oh, really? And that's how it started.
Yeah.
And I just had to make myself go in there. And and that was the start of selling. And I had this series, which the other gallery owner always used to laugh at me. He would just say, what are you going to call this? And I said, well, it's a day at the beach. And he said, no, you called the last one A Day at the Beach. I said, no, it's a series. It's called a Year at the Beach. A Year at the Beach.
This is day 5.
Yeah. Well, I had the date on it. So I said, I can't call it, like, you know, Illusion 3 or something. I can't come up with that stuff. I said, it's called A Year at the Beach, 3rd of March, you know. So we now have this joke between us. He said, you know, he'll just look at something like this and say, what do you call that? Year at the Beach? It's like, no. So I've learned a few things along the way, of, you know, tried to come up with something that, you know.
But titles are very difficult. Titles are very difficult for, especially if it's abstract, even more so.
I find that easy.
Do you?
Yeah, because otherwise I'll call everything blue wave, grey sky, sea foam, blue wave, cobalt blue wave, stormy night. You know, and if you've got 365 of these things, what do you call them all? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. I can understand that element, but where did you then go from? What, for instance, you've got a whole section on your website where you've been painting people at work, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, so how did that start? Because you've
Right. So the portrait thing is quite interesting, and you know, people have chapters in their life that they want to read through very, very quickly, don't they? You want to turn the page and so on, but actually it was quite important at the time. So, separated from my husband, I stayed in the States. the girls were at a school, and the school had a fundraiser, and it's an American style fundraiser. So rather than auctioning, like a toilet bag from Boots, which is left over from Christmas, um, people would donate diamond bracelets. They'd donate a weekend for a family of four in Disney, and these would be the auction items. And I went to the head teacher and I just said, look, I'm a bit stuck for, because people, it was a private school, people donated chunks of money. So I just said, I can't do that, but for my contribution, I'll put in a custom portrait. So I put a portrait that I'd done of my own girls onto a stand, and it was one of those silent auctions. Everybody just writes their name down and says what they
Yeah.
want to bid. It was the hottest item of the evening, and people were bidding all the way down, more and more, to get a custom portrait of their kids, because nobody'd ever done something like that. They'd all got diamond bracelets, and everybody'd been to Disney 8 times already. We lived 3 hours away. So that was interesting. So everybody who didn't get it, they came and asked me to paint their kids. So I just said, I'm doing beach portraits. Don't paint plants. Don't paint trees. We lived in Florida in the sort of like the marsh areas. It's very, very much like the Norfolk Broads, if you know that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Reed beds, palm trees, and sunshine. But I said, I'm not doing green stuff. I can't get my head around it. But I'll paint a seascape, beach portrait. Started there, so I carried on with portraiture. But I think as well, years back, I went to medical school. I just kind of just throw that in there. And while I was,
It's quite an important part, to be fair.
I mean, I have to go back and forward, but so on. When I was then doing some GP training in Aberdeen, I found like a life drawing class, and it was a slightly civilized daytime work. I was able to go to life drawing classes in the evening, so I did that for about 3 years, and that was amazing. I just love doing that, and I still go when I can. And over the years, I've often dipped back into it. So it's been to the Mal galleries to do life drawing with some amazing models, and there's a local place in Norwich where because I live in Norfolk, and I go there as well. There's drop-in sessions, so with my crazy schedule, doesn't matter if I can't go. I haven't paid for a block of lessons. It's just drop in and you pay as you go. That's amazing. So I've always loved the human body, always loved shape. I kind of know what's going on under the skin and all this business. So I love saying, I know what that muscle's called, and just draw it in, and because I know where it starts and finishes. So
I love the photographing shape of photographing, and it has been said to me, look, you've got a lot of women. Where's the men? And I always say, but they just don't fit with what I do because of the shape's not right. And so, to me, even when I've got somebody that, I'm fortunate that the people that I do photograph to create some of the stuff I do understand what I'm doing. And often they will be burlesque dancers who are completely aware of what shape they portray to an audience and so on. So, that really helps with what I do. But also you have to be able to convey to somebody that's either going to buy or looking at your work. You need them to see that. So it's quite important that actually that relationship between the model that is creating the picture with you comes through to the person who either ends up buying it or sees it. So,
and I think gesture is really important to me. So so that's kind of how I kind of like threw myself into portraiture, because I kind of felt like I needed to, because I needed an income at that point. I wasn't working as a doctor in the States, but I was needing to have an income. So I started painting portraits. I just told people I could do it.
Well, so one thing so I went right through your Instagram page, and the one that really jumped out at me, and I'm going to jump to the end because we'll come back to all these other ones in this, but I'm going to jump to the end because it was this. And there's so much in what would appear to be quite a simple sketch, but there's so much in that
Yeah.
and so much emotion, so clever with shading, etc., etc. And that's what I mean. So from a portrait point of view, that's what you want, isn't it? You don't want that to not tell the story of what that image is.
And interestingly, so that's my younger daughter who now lives in Japan. I've got a sketchbook next to me here that I'll show you because I really, really love urban sketching. And I,
Mm,
you know, when I went to visit her, I did a lot of urban sketching near the vicinity where she lives. But those colours, if you look under her neck and the blues, that's
yeah,
one of my favourite colours, like a lavender.
yeah.
Um, blue, it's like, the mixture I use for watercolor is like opera rose and either indigo or opera rose and phthalo blue, and it creates this wonderful purple which you can use in almost any kind of shadow.
Mm,
And so that's some chalk. That's just Ingres pastels on a rough paper. But yeah, that was that I love drawing my girls because they were really good at. And even even a few weeks ago, she texted me and she said, "It's all right, mummy. I can still be your muse if you want."
yeah, and
Because you kind of need people to practice on, you know.
you
Um,
need, but and as I said just now, you need people that also get what you're trying to do,
yeah, yeah.
and
And
that obviously,
because trust me, you know, it's not the first, you know, it's not the first thing. So the portraits that you then showed of the ones at work, so that ended up being like a pandemic project.
mm,
So I worked at A&E a lot through the pandemic, and it was kind of like a what do you call it, like a morale project. So
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know, I pretty much did like a shift that was like 3 p.m. until 11 p.m. at night. And so I'd go to bed and then the next morning I'd get up and I'd paint and I'd kind of try to get through one portrait in one single session. So I was sort of maybe 5 or 6 hours and I just quickly whiz it up and then I'd put it on my Instagram and I just tried to do one every day. I got through about 70 in the end. Um,
mm,
so I was doing 2 or 3 of those a week. And I was just trying to do candid pictures of, because I don't, you know, I mean, I don't like those sort of formal portraits that are,
no, 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 no.
it doesn't say enough to me. But
No, no, no. I don't. And none of mine are ever like that.
I,
Mine are
yeah,
my. I get people having a chat.
yeah,
I want them to be interacting with someone,
yeah,
and generally, if I want that sort of portrait, the person they're chatting to will be out of shot.
yeah,
I just need them to look like they're,
yeah.
doing that. Yeah, it's
So I
quite
think
important.
a lot of, if I was going to ever pick any type of portraiture, I would be the fly on the wall because I want to capture their thought or a moment, and I like that journalistic narrative moment in time bit when people are silent with their own thoughts and you just you get it, you know. So I tried to so obviously I'm there working as well, so I had to take photographs. So and because, you know, and I'd say to the patient, you know, look, I'm doing a morale project, can we borrow your hand to be in this shot? Why? So it'd be somebody taking blood, or operated theatre, or somebody taking blood pressure,
Mm,
a plaster cast on an arm, you know. And I kind of just grab people doing lots of different things, even the mundane things like putting a foot dressing on, or I just wanted getting a drugs out of a cupboard. I just managed to get people to just stand up and just that they, you know, they, it could have been like a Greek goddess with an urn, but actually
yeah.
they're trees in the cupboard, or getting drugs out of the Mediwell. You know, it's this sort of journalistic, even just sitting there like this, drinking a cup of coffee and reading a report. It just captured lots of moments, and I felt like what was lovely was it connected people who were shielding at home, and they
Mm,
were like, "Oh, that's my favourite room to work in. Oh, I haven't seen so and so for ages." Um,
yeah.
and they would just
Yeah.
see all of their colleagues, and we get people who are new to the department who'd been seconded there because others had to leave, and you know, and it was a lovely mix of, yeah,
Mm.
trying to persuade people. I just said, you know, can I paint your portrait? And they just look at me weird and just think no. And I said, no, honestly, I'll do a really nice job. And they say, yeah, of course you will, Kate. You know, because of course they did not know
They
that.
didn't know you did that.
No.
No, no.
But then that's because I'm either at work or I'm at home, and often people have no idea what you do in your spare time.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So on that line a little
yeah,
bit,
yeah,
there is again, on your website, there is a little section that says, I don't want to be trapped by a person, place, or time, nor by a style I've grown out of, because I think what I learn matures forward into the next phase.
yeah,
So I talk to every artist actually about their style,
yeah,
how the fact that your style, even though you move into a different area, it still needs to be you.
yeah,
And I've said to you earlier before we came on air that that's the case. So with you, so let's move on a bit
yeah,
because we'll see. Let me just jump back from this now to the after that. So and we'll come back to this in a minute. But this is where you are now.
yeah,
There's a few pictures behind you that people can see as well, but this is where you are now. So you've moved not from, because by the sound of it, you still do that other work as well.
yeah.
But you've now gone into a different direction. And is this because you saw somebody doing this kind of thing somewhere and you thought, oh, I'd like to try that? Or, how have you come to now, which is quite different, but because of the, um, it's difficult to say because I see all the movement in this, so that relates back to
Yeah,
the sea and everything else you were doing in the first place. Uh, but how does that work for you?
yeah.
You know, I've
So
yeah, go on.
you'll never guess. So I'm gonna just have to tell you.
Yeah, go on, go for it.
So girls and I moved back to the UK, and
Mm,
I'm still painting seascapes and things. And um, I my brother said to me, the one who's the illustrator, he just said, there's something going on in Cambridge. I'm not going to do it this year, but you might like to do it. And it was a science and art collaboration.
mhm,
Pint of Science. It's all over the world now. It started in Cambridge about 12 years ago, and it's pub talks where scientists explain their life's research in an hour talk, and then they paired up with an artist to interpret it. And I thought, oh, I'd love to do that. So I've now been doing this particular thing for, I think this is my 11th or 12th year that I've been
oh
involved
wow.
in these scientific collaborations. And so I ended up always being given they kind of have different sections of because they have about 70 scientists in about 5 or 6 pubs over 3 nights, giving X number of talks per pub
Mhm,
over a course of a week. So you turn that in, and it turns into, say, 50 to 70 talks with as many artists, and everyone's just, so you have to have, so it takes about 8 weeks to put together the art bit, because you find out what their research is. Might be about DNA or tuberculosis, or might be astrophysics, or it might be environmental something or other, mathematics, theoretical stuff. And you sit down with them, they explain their work, and then they just sit there and wait for you to think, oh yeah, I know what I can do. Or you get people who say, well, I want you to draw this because that is what, and so you kind of have to take a step back, get ideas from them, and then just see what pops up to the top to inspire you. So I ended up working with, there's one behind me here, but resin work. So what you've got on the screen there, that's resin. And this was so my what I always like to do is convey movement, and I love color, and I like explaining things. I like technical stuff, and I like challenging stuff. So sitting on the beach trying to accurately draw a wave that has just moved is quite hard. And working with the resin, I kind of fell into that. I had a kit, and I was trying to, I think I was had a painting and I wanted to seal the top, and I wanted to varnish it. I think I'd probably sprayed it. I wanted to try something different because I think it was too small. I didn't have a piece of glass. I wanted to frame it, and I thought, oh, that's not going to work. So I thought, oh, I think I've got some resin somewhere, and it was just a little kit. It might have even been something when the girls had a an art thing. And I mixed this stuff together. I put it over the top of a watercolor, and I thought, oh, I really like that. And it was about a credit card size. And then I started mixing resin, and then I started putting some color into it. And I kind of played with it. And the stuff I used was not designed to go into resin. It's not those people use that, people, you can see a lot of people doing acrylic work with alcohol
Yeah.
and how that, this is not that. So this is a two-part, like
Mix.
like an industrial two-part clear resin that you'd use to surface worktops. You can get art versions of it as well, but you'd maybe seal a bar top with this. You could put glass on it, hot drinks and whatnot. But I had also, how like you have art stuff at home, and I had some kind of alkyd mixed media type product, and I had this resin, and it wasn't setting, so I started dropping colors into it, and I thought, oh, that looks like cells. It looks like cells in the body. It looks like stuff under the microscope. So I then started thinking, I wonder if I could do something that looks like the thyroid gland. Oh, got out my histology atlas. I started trying to create tissue of using this art stuff, and I'll show you one. So this is
Hold on. Let me put you full screen so we can see
right,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
So this is one I did earlier a few years back. This was, so I basically had like a central area, and this you can sort of see here all these little cell shapes.
Yeah.
And that was like, I think that might have either been an ovary or a bit of thyroid. This was like the guts. So this is like the lining of the small intestine. It has all these really highly, high surface area things where all the food's absorbed. So I was sort of started to do all these technical things out of resin on like a box. So that's what it is.
So if you're, hold on 1 second. So if you're going to sell that,
yeah.
do you go into all of that? This is what this really is, or do you let them try and decide for themselves what it is?
It's a bit of both, because I sold
Yeah.
the ones I did for Pint of Science. I've sold them every single year, and I've won
Yeah.
the best in show several times. I've got
Well,
one of
yeah.
and one of these pieces went to the New York Hall of Science Sci-Art Gallery, and it's in the same place as like Apollo 11's like little thing that went on the moon, and you got this funny little piece of art by Kate Grant in the same gallery.
Yeah.
I think people who like sort of technical stuff, and maybe they, something for like an office or like a corporate place, it looks really good, places like that, because people can just take it or leave it. It's just abstract enough. If they wanted to know what it was, I could say to them, oh, well, that one on the screen there was to do with like morals in artificial intelligence. That's what that was stimulated by, as a discussion with a philosopher who teaches masters in Cambridge about ethics, and whether artificial intelligence has an ethical side. Do we ascribe ethical ideas? We call things good or bad when they're artificial, or does it do it by itself? It's kind of quite a weird sort of place to take your brain. But I and that the other one that you had, that red one, that was actually stimulated by the Rare Disease Network in Cambridge, who I had to have a conversation with somebody, because they the researchers, they basically say, I don't know how you're going to make art out of this, and I think just leave it with me, and then something pops up, and the Rare Disease Network was, she was telling me about her research was to do with patient groups who direct the direction of a research, because when you've got a rare disease that maybe only 2 people in the world has got, they can't possibly throw millions onto 2 people because there might never be another 2 people with that. But if
Yeah.
you get lots of people who all have rare disease with all of the same problem,
Hmm.
say, well, all of you feel tired, all of you lose your hair. Well, let's research that. So it's like a collaborative direction to take rare disease research into. So the piece I did was intersecting Venn diagram type style, and I had curves of represent, and I'd gold leaf little grains of barley, and I had grouped them like, 5 here, 3 here, 1 there, and it was to represent these little discrete groups of patients, and then everything intersecting and collaborating together, I could explain it to people, but they could also appreciate it as something abstract art that had movement. So I kind of like the challenge of trying to interpret something that is really abstract, and I also like something that I can't control, because that resin, my goodness, it changes in front of you when it's curing and you're dropping color and it's blooming like this and you're trying to make it take a certain shape. It's hard.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
we have got a video of you doing that.
Okay.
So let's play that so that people can actually see how you do what you do, which is fascinating. So how do you choose the color that you're going to start with? Where does that come from? Where do you go, or do you? Because obviously you've got to have something in your head that you're working on.
Yeah.
Do you start dropping colors in and thinking, oh, I like the way that's working with that one, or is that come from something else you've done, or what, where's your color palette? Where's that come from?
It's so planned, you wouldn't believe it. I've got all my colors lined because I've got a window of opportunity that if I take too long overdoing it,
It's
and
too
we're
late. Yeah,
talking dropping blobs of color in with a cocktail stick, maybe 200
yeah.
times. So if I can't work quickly enough, then I basically have to plan all my colors. So I've got all my groupings. I'll have blues, purples, pinks. I've got it all set out over the floor, and it's just a mad chaos. But I do try to think. I have to remember again. It's this idea about layering transparent color that I was talking about earlier. All these pieces that I do now, they all have 3 layers of resin. So I need to know what's going to happen at the bottom as well as the top, and what colors are going to then be integrated with
Mm.
each other when you're looking through. So when you go to the Flux exhibition, you'll be able to look close up and see that there's multiple layers. And I kind of want it to look like tissue. like what you'd see under a microscope, that you could see a 3D image going down into the piece. So I'm always thinking of that when I'm picking my colours. So nowadays I often will do yellows and greens in the same area, or yellows and oranges in the same area, because they're sort of more together on the colour wheel. What I don't want is to have red, yellow, blue and green and then get brown at the end when it's interacting with the light. So I do pick, but I tend to maybe say, right, this one is going to be blue themed, and I'll maybe have an additional color. I might want a really neutral palette and everything is like pale pinks, beiges, grays. So I kind of, it sort of depends what I'm doing. Sometimes, like every artist, you know, when you've run out of all of your really great colors and you're left with something really strange combination, I try to force myself to use that sometimes. Because I think that can be quite interesting when you get like, when you've bought your packs of colors and you always end up with 3 browns and an orange. Sometimes I think, you know, a limited color palette is quite an artistic challenge, and I quite like that too. Sometimes with the research though, I would always ask the researcher, what colors have they used in their research, what you know, their favorite is. And I'll show you something else as well, because what the one behind me here, that was done on a project at the Medical Research Council in Cambridge, and it was a chap who was investigating tuberculosis drugs. So he had a lab full of fish. So this was my process. Was, you see that, Gary, there?
Yeah.
That is the view under a microscope of fish larvae. And this was like a cassette where you could look at each of the fish larvae in each of the cassettes under the microscope. And so he said, oh, well, come and see what I'm doing. Come and look down the microscope. And these little larvae were stained in different immunofluorescent colors. So that was my view down the microscope as I saw all these things. So I made a lino cut of that, because I really like repetition in my work. I like lines and graphics and maths and stuff. And once I'd done that, I also then did this lino cut of these zebrafish, because it was zebrafish were the fish that he'd got in the lab. And then after I'd done this, so I knew what the fish looked like, I then did a little mock-up of how I wanted the resin piece to go.
Okay. Yeah.
So these are actually little silver-leafed grains of rice, and I just had these little fish swimming across the resin, and then I went on to my really big piece, which was focused on the lung. So going to, you know, do I tell my people who buy my work what it is? And I said, well, that's actually a tuberculous collection of pus in a lung.
You know, this, I'll tell you what, there's a bit of a darkness in your work, I feel. And yeah, I love a bit of darkness, but
his research will turn into some amazing new drugs for TB. I felt I really wanted to honour that, and that's where.
But also, perspective. Forget what that really is.
Yeah.
As an abstract piece, it's great. It's great.
I mean, it looks really lovely close up. I mean, you can't really see that, but the lighting in here isn't fab. But you know, it is really. So many people. I had somebody from the British Antarctic Survey saying, I really want to buy that, because it reminds me when I go deep sea diving in the South Pole.
Yeah. See that.
What do you call them, starfish and shells. He said, really makes me think, because it's so dark underwater when you're diving, and we see all these amazing colors of the coral and whatnot, but his wife wouldn't let him buy it, because she said it's about TB, it's not the ocean. So it's just quite funny, you know. I think I really like explaining science. I like challenges, I like color. So that if there was a through line in my work, you know, I say, we were talking about, we learn stuff, and I think I'm always, I'll try a new medium. I'll see what it learns, but I'm always coming back to color, and I'm always coming back to slight chaos. I'm always coming back to something that's living and breathing and changing all the time.
Mm.
Um, so I love the waves. I love that. Oh, you've missed it. Blink if you miss it. You know, you can't paint it. It's never going to stop. Just like the human body changes. You know, that's
So last week's guest, um, he was in a similar position in that he takes multiple images that are layered on top of each other,
yeah,
and he has to do it there and then. And if he goes one layer too far, it's ruined.
yeah,
So he has to know exactly if he's in. Sometimes he's putting 40 images together in just multiple shots, but all
yeah,
being taken on the same part of the sensor in a camera, and
yeah.
he has to, got no choice.
And I've had some spectacular fails with resin because
Mm,
you know you've either worked on one half of the picture too long, and by the time you get
mm,
to the end, it looks totally different because the resin's already curing and you
yeah.
vote. So I've learned to grow with that. I now pour in smaller sections and work on smaller sections, whereas when I first started, I would pour the whole piece, and it just is a very expensive hobby to get wrong. So
I know.
yeah,
Yeah, I know. And that it
but
is, but then also,
it's the mother of invention, though.
yeah, but you're also learning
Yeah,
from that. And that, look, if you don't make mistakes, if you
yeah.
don't get things wrong, you don't learn.
Oh, not at all.
And you need to, that's progression, isn't it? So
Yeah.
you kind of find it really quite interesting though that so what you're basically saying is that you do plan the picture.
Oh,
So
yeah.
does that mean that
I've
you
sketched. If I'm
you've
doing,
sketched it all out ready, so
yeah.
you got your plan ready, you know where your colors, yeah, that's interesting.
Mhm. And actually, I even um, I even now, if my base layer is black, because I feel like it just makes me feel more of like microscope, black feel,
Mm,
and
mm,
colours just really sing on top of that, in a way that I haven't managed. I don't like the aesthetic of something with a coloured background or white. It doesn't work
mm,
for me. This is my style. And thing is, people don't know I do watercolours in the science zone. They only know me for this, but it's
yeah, yeah.
into these annual science things. They just say, oh, there's Kate's thing. They just know it straight off, and I really like that. So I tend to, if I'm doing anything scientific, it's always the resin work, because whether or not it is uh, medical stuff or a DNA thing or a genomics project or whatever, I've turned it into something that looks like me, and they all know me for that. Whereas other people know me as a watercolorist or portrait artist. So I think I've learned to accept that. I know that, wouldn't it be lovely if we only had one hat and everybody and said, oh, Picasso just did blue paintings, or he just did stuff that looked like Guernica all the time. Well, he just really wasn't like that. And I
No.
probably I have got two hats. I'm a doctor, I'm an artist, I'm a mother. Uh, people have no idea when I'm at the hospital that I'm doing this on as my side gig. They just don't know that about me. And I mean, they do really, but we pretend that, and and I think that I've made peace with that. I accept about myself that one day I might be doing a watercolor, and the next day I might be doing a portrait or something in resin. And I've decided I'm not going to try and justify that I've got different styles. I love it when people know my work, but I think I had a really big phase of watercolors when everybody knew that's what I did. I had a big phase of portraits when everybody knew my portraits. And then now
Mm.
I've also got this, and I'm doing a lot of abstracts, but all the way through, it's all color, color, color. It's all movement. It's a lot of it is form and structure and quite a lot of technical stuff.
And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I was getting at with, yeah, I was getting at that when I said about your style still comes through,
Yeah.
because your style is all around color and movement. So it's always going to come through.
Yeah.
If all you ever did was still life, for example, well, it wouldn't, would it? So, that's always going to come through. I'm
Yeah.
going to, believe it or not, we're at 57 minutes, which is,
Yeah,
I could, got to be honest, I could probably carry on talking for another hour. But what I want to just show people is, so your website is being created, but I do want to show people,
Yeah.
let me just get that part up. I do want to show people your website. So, and the links, think, yeah, I can put that up here. So anybody interested, you can see this is the links that you need. You're on Instagram, that's the bottom one, Kate
Yeah.
Grant Art, and then top one, it's kategrantart.com. So I will share, let's just get rid of that caption. I will share the entire screen. That's the one I want. Share that, so people can see that this is your website,
Yeah.
and currently being put together. But this is where we're at with it at the moment, or so you're at with it at the moment, and people can jump up here, see your current work, and these are all the current things that are available to buy. Now, we had a little discussion beforehand as well to say that you will also be doing prints of this, and you hopefully have some of those with you at Flux.
Yeah.
But just give people a sense of some of these, like this one, for instance. You know
Yeah.
what? It looks a big old picture. There it's 60 by 48 inches, so it is
It's
big.
massive. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's a few people that are going to be at Flux that you'll have a bit of an affinity with, who do some big pictures, and you can understand too how that's not necessarily, that picture is not on what you would call a huge wall, but it fits. So here comes another question, which is, I personally like to deliver my art so that I can talk to the buyer about where they're going to put it.
Yeah.
It's quite important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find often is that people can't visualize at all where work is going to fit in their own home.
Yeah.
And I've had it, in fact, some things that you were saying just now about the wife said, no, that's not, I'm not having that. It's about TB. One of the things,
I could have sold that, for a lot of money.
yeah, well, but
He absolutely
exactly.
loved it, but yeah.
So one of the things that I always I shudder, because I would have a man standing one of my big pictures. Oh my God, I love it. Oh, I love it. And then he says the words that I know I'm never going to see him again.
Yeah.
I'll just run it past my wife.
Yeah.
And no, and I actually had at last Flux.
Yeah.
I've got a very big street scene, and they had built a pub in the garden, basically, for all the family, and he wanted this above the bar. And essentially what it is, a lot of my work is steampunk. So you've got 150 steampunks all going mad in the street because there are two naked women walking down the middle.
Yeah.
And they're walking down the middle because there's a time traveling serial killer trying to get into the police morgue on the left, and he's created all this trouble. The husband loved it.
Yeah.
But she just stood there with a straight face, and I thought, no, there's no way they're going to buy it. Another artist came up and said, are you gonna have it? He said to the husband, and he said, if I buy that, I'll be divorced. And the other artist said, let's hope then.
Yeah.
And somebody else said to me, you should have a box of chocolates on hand. Start dishing out chocolates to the wife. But I am funny because in that yes, I would love to have sold it, but only if they both liked it.
Yeah.
It's not. It's more about, for me, it's more about someone that really buys into your art. And actually, in truth, it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter how much it is. If they really like it, they'll have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I often what I find, you probably get this as well, but people will say, I really like that, but actually what I'd really like is one about what I do, what my work, what I want to reflect. It's like a commission based on they like it, and if you could just tweak it, then it'll be perfect. And there's some things that you can do, but I've got commissions waiting to be done that were on the basis of somebody'd already bought one, and then someone else has, well, if you sold it, but can you do it to me with a bit more blues or more reds, or bigger, smaller? I can fit one of those panels, not the three, because I often work in a triptych now, because it allows me to expand the wall space that I can put the resin onto, and I like that. So I've got I've got 2 triptychs at Flux. Yeah,
And
it's
how heavy are they? How heavy are they to be on the wall?
uh I did
Is
one.
I mean, is the resin's not, presumably not that thick?
It's so it's on ply, because I found
Okay. Yeah,
ply
yeah, yeah,
works really well for
yeah.
resin. It doesn't warp. Um,
No.
so it's on ply. How heavy would they be? Well, I can carry 3 of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I can carry 3 of them, and when I go through London with them, I put them on a little dolly trolley thing, one of those little
Yeah,
I said put them on
yeah.
that. So they're not awful.
Okay, that's not bad. No.
In my own home,
Yeah.
I put them on the wall with command strips.
Really?
Yeah, and I put the 7.5 kilo command strips. I put 2 vertically, put them on the wall. They've never moved. In you should.
I'd worry about that.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
but they work really well. But if you get the heavy ones and you do it as it says on the tin, then they stay there.
brilliant. So, what have you got planned? So, obviously, Flux, fortnight's time. What have you got planned uh, after that? You got any other exhibitions you're going to be doing, or?
I've got some commissions to work on this summer, so I've got to do that. I'm waiting for another hospital exhibition, which I think I'm just waiting for a date later in the year. I've had I think I've had 3 hospital exhibitions with the portrait so far. One was for about 18 months, another one was at a different hospital for 6 months, and then the other one went to South Wales, which was like the home of the NHS, and that was the 75th anniversary of
Oh
the
yeah.
NHS. So my portraits
Mm.
went there to Tredegar. So I've got another exhibition. I might ask her, who arranges it at the hospital, if I can put some of my abstracts this time. So I do that, and then I do a medical podcast as well. So I've usually got something ticking over for artwork for that.
And
And
so, what about? We've already discussed that. Watercolors, portraits, abstract. You got anything in the back of your head you think that could be next? I might have a little dive into that direction.
I'm really loving abstracts at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm really into that quite heavily.
So it's quite that. So what's interesting about that for me is that until I started doing these shows,
Yeah,
I didn't really get it. I
yeah,
think some abstract I just didn't really get. And then as I started interviewing people about how they do what they do and what they were, etc., the penny started to drop.
right.
I'm. It's difficult for me because I'm a technical artist. So I would sit in some respects in the Leonardo, and
Yeah,
my influences in the way that I work have always been Caravaggio,
yeah,
Vermeer,
yeah,
Dali.
yeah,
That type of stuff has always been for me.
yeah.
So I've never really entertained the kind of abstract stuff
But my
until I started really doing some of this.
yeah, my abstracts is really maths based though, um,
Yeah, yeah.
because the stuff that I have done as part of my style, I use a pendulum,
Oh,
to draw my shape, which is the structure,
Ah,
onto which
okay.
I then put my colours, because it then it's got shapes in it that your brain sees, even though your eyes might not realise you're looking at it. But because there's curves in there, your
You're
brain.
going to get a perfect curve as
Yeah,
well, aren't
yeah.
you? Because of the swing.
Do you want to see how I do it? I've got, this is my dog with string, and I have got a beam in my room where I paint, and I get the dog and I throw it over the beam, and then I drag up this big long piece of string up to the top, and I've got a plastic bag with water in it, and I swing. This is just how I do it. And I swing this plastic bag with water onto my boards until I get a shape that I like. And it's a bit like the waves thing again. You can't ever get it back if you rub it off and start again. I like that randomness about it, because I know it's maths. I know that it's laws of physics, how fast I swing my pendulum, how slow, whether I lift it higher or lower to get a different shape. But I know that if I think I don't really like that and I wipe it, it's gone, just like this, the wave of the sea. And so, but because there is the circular stuff in it, that's why there's some harmony that just happens, because the colors flow, the shape is in the right place. It ends up looking really balanced. So those ones you showed of my resin with the sort of like the shapes,
Yeah.
that seems to work.
So I think what's just happened there is I've just got my clip for Instagram.
What, like this dog?
The artist 2 weeks ago, who was absolutely hilarious, had been a pop star.
Right.
And so I just said, what are you called? What were you called? And she went, oh, you might have to bleep this out. I thought, oh, here we go. And she said, we were called Digital Orgasm. And I said,
Yeah.
oh, right, there's going to be people Googling that now.
Yeah.
God knows what's going to come up. But yeah, now I thought, right, there's my clip for Instagram.
Very
I think
good.
it's quite interesting, isn't it? How
Yeah.
you
But I think
can,
it's always this, you're trying to make something work. You're trying to
yeah.
get some, I could get a compass and a piece of
Oh
string.
no,
I've
but
done that
it still wouldn't
before.
be as free. It wouldn't be as free as what you've just said.
No,
It
no.
wouldn't be.
And this way, it's like it's often, when you're stuck and you've got a piece of big paper and it's got nothing on it, you don't know what to do. These days I now just scribble something random on it, or I walk over it, or I leave it in the garden or something. And then once it starts having something on it, you then got a structure and go over the top of that. I like that friction you get from something that isn't, there's no shape or meaning behind it, and then you draw over the top of that. And the the pendulum thing's the same. You basically just have a structure, and then that sometimes
Yeah.
is where you want to take your ideas next. So
So I'm going to finish with again a little bit from your website. I'm going to finish with what you've put here,
okay,
which is, I am endlessly curious about life and want my art to be interesting because I've been curious on an intellectual level about the stimuli for it.
yeah,
So that I find that's really interesting, because that actually tells people exactly what's going on
yeah,
in here,
yeah,
rather than just saying, oh yeah, well, this is this and that's that. Whoa, knocked my mic over.
yeah,
This is it, that's that. Just that little part that you've put there actually does
yeah,
really give people a big insight into what you do.
yeah.
We are now,
Yeah, because I'm not just painting. I'm thinking so hard
yes,
about, yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
well, and it's true. From my point of view of what I do, I I see my work completely finished before I ever pick my camera up, before I ever start
yeah,
doing anything in Photoshop. It's finished in my head. I see it. The bit I love is, all right, here's the idea, here's the finished picture. How am I going to create it? That bit between those 2 points, that's the bit I love. The problem solving of, this is my end product.
yeah,
How do I get there?
yeah,
And that's the bit I love. But it's also true, I think, with artists, that we can all look at our work and go, I don't think that's finished yet. And
Yeah.
then you're still doing another little bit on it, and it's still, and then at some point you've just got to go, you know what, I'm done, I'm finished now, that's it. Yeah, really interesting. Look,
Yeah.
hour and 12 minutes.
I know.
So we have got, no, don't, please don't. I could have carried on talking for another hour, but it's been fascinating. I hope people watching will think the same. It's been absolutely fascinating. Really look forward to meeting you at Flux. I think you're gonna have a great time.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant exhibition. There's a couple of things going on over the weekend as well.
Yeah.
And also,
4 days. So
yeah, so basically, also what happens is that you Lisa calls it her Flux family, and it's true, because everybody is. We all help each other. I can talk for England, so because of that, other artists will bring me a bottle of water and say, "For God's sake, drink some of this," because you just can't stop. But it's everybody looks after each other. They're a fabulous bunch of people. All the artists are great, and we all genuinely like to help each other. And I think it's quite important that there's no competition, because there won't be anybody else doing what you do,
no.
and that's, and also there's no booths. So you do an art fair sometimes, and it's booths, and you're creating a barrier.
Yeah.
So that there's none of that. It's you're walking round big flat walls with loads of art on it. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
So yeah, I look forward to seeing you, and looking forward to catching up and have another chat, really, because there's great big loads of things I could have asked you, but we run out of time, which is also a good thing, to be
Yeah.
fair,
Well,
because it could have been like,
yeah.
yeah. So look, don't run away. I'm just going to wrap this up, and we'll have a little quick chat afterwards, and
Yeah.
then that'll be brilliant.
All right.
And then I unfortunately can't remember who the guest is after you, but I will put it in the bottom of this so that people know who the following week's guest is, and that will be the last one before Flux. I am planning, if we can get the Wi-Fi working properly, I'm going to try and do something live from the private view, if I can find the space and time to do it. But yeah, okay. So brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on. Been a great guest. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, loved it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, there you go. I told you it would be good. So much I wanted to ask, and so much more that could have been done, and probably going to get Kate on again at some time in the future, because the progression of her work, and it's very interesting. All the stuff, so much stuff that we could have spoken about as well that we didn't get to. So I might perhaps next year get Kate back on, and we'll see where she's got to there. But of course, if you come into Flux, you'll be able to see her for yourself. But for now, thanks very much for watching.